Francis of the Filth, Chapter 4.
What, is that too rude?
The boy with greasy, unwashed hair lowered himself down the last few feet of rock and began to pick his way towards the sea. He had no idea where he was. It was perfectly still, perfectly quiet, and the landscape appeared in silhouettes. The expanse above him was shadowed, yet without cloud. It was impossible to make out any sort of distance in relation to it. He sat on an ice-cold rock and looked out over a sea of liquid so black it could have been crude oil. Gnarled and twisted hands continued to reach up out of it as they had before, but this time in silence. He watched them grasp in desperation, yet he felt no emotion, only emptiness. This place was weird, dreamlike. It had a stronger sense of reality than he had ever known, but it was hallucinatory as well. In this realm, there was nothing other than a huge frozen rock and an ocean of lost souls stretching out from it. There was no atmosphere, no warmth, no color, no fear, no joy, no desire, and no time. As such, there was no telling how long he had been here or how long he would be here. Presently, from within the confines of the shadows, something dark was fumbling along. He wasn't sure what to make of it at first, and watched till the intentness of his gaze was able to form an image. Then the creature stepped from mirage onto clear ice, and he saw that the darkness was not all shadow but mostly flesh. The creature, an unsightly humanoid, was of singular matter and one color from head to foot. He drew near and sat beside the boy. Though a total stranger in a foreign world, there was neither any sense of alarm nor relief. The two observed each other for a period, and then the creature spoke.
Frank,
How do you know my name?
I was sent to you
By who?
by higher powers.
Frank sat and observed the entity before him.
Am I in hell?
No,
Surely this can't be heaven.
no.
So why in this place?
We are in between worlds, off the map, literally nowhere.
And what are we doing here?
Nothing, of course. But I have been sent to you to bring revelation.
Revelation? Revelation of what?
Revelation of the beginning and of the paradigms.
What about the end?
I don't have that authority.
What happened to my world?
Your world no longer exists. And I'm tempted to say that it never did. But that might be misleading. Suffice to say, you're no longer in that frequency and never can be again.
Frank studied his companion closely. His face was rimmed as though by a tight circle of light, and his head occasionally gave a mild twitch. He seemed serene, but occupied.
Who are you?
My name is...
You gotta be shitting me.
I'm also known as Pink Guy.
So y'all go with Pink Guy.
Frank assumed in the gray hues of that place that his flesh, in the right light, had to be a shade of pink.
Listen carefully, Frank. Life as we know it in all its fullness is to be revealed on you.
Speak on, dear friend.
All of a sudden, the gravity of the situation made Frank start to speak like an idiot.
All life and matter is contained within 3 known omniverses, each of which contains any number of universes. The omniverses are divided into dozens of dimensions, and each dimension is divided into millions of realms.
He looked at Frank to see if he was comprehending. The pink creature spoke with a voice that seemed not his own. Indeed, in most other realms, he would only have been capable of communicating in a series of grunts and squeals. But here he spoke with a somber tone and a beautiful timbre.
Are there any black people in these omniverses?
Asked Frank.
What do you think?
Asked Pink Eye. There was a pregnant silence before they both burst out laughing.
This really must be the future then.
Laughed Frank. Despite being flung into an unknown world of darkness, Frank's garbage 1940s humor stayed intact.
There are many life forms throughout the omniverses, Frank.
It called again, slowly approaching Frank.
Many, and these entities essentially fall or are placed into one of 7 tiers of being.
Who decided that?
Frank asked. Pink Eye ignored this question as one of utter stupidity. He continued.
The bottom tier contains the wretched. The wretched are those who have been confined to the abysses and the infernos. They exist, but only in a form that knows suffering and pain.
I'm guessing these hands.
He said, gesturing out to the sea.
Yes, they have been condemned.
So what?
He struggled to find the right word.
For damages.
Frank looked off the edge of the rock as one of the many wretched humanoid shadows swam towards him, reaching out with those skeletal hands, asking for another chance. Its mouth opened, but nothing came out. Frank could feel the warmth leaving its body as if its soul was being chipped away by the second. He quickly broke eye contact. Pink Eye saw Frank's discomfort and cleared his throat.
The second tier from the bottom contains the brute beasts. Lower than humans and other humanoid creations, they exist, but in a lesser form and with nominal consciousness. They can neither be elevated from their level nor condemned from it. They toil all their days as servants of those who exist above them. To those above them are dominated and pitied. To the wretched, the beasts are free and secure, and the envy of their sorry souls.
As he said this, Frank continued to watch the knotted limbs stretching up from the Black Sea. He was still not entirely comfortable with this entity before him, and so watched him with a cautious eye.
The third tier
Pink Guy continued.
hosts the mere mortals. You would be familiar with these. The somewhat sad and conflicted mob, they live a quasi-existence in worlds in which they procreate and kill, create and destroy, love and hate. No one really knows quite what to do with them. There's minimal intervention at this point. They are sort of work in progress.
Frank looked down as he heard this.
I was trying to make the world a better place.
By melting flesh.
He moved on without another word.
The fourth tier, and fourth from the top, are the rank and files. This includes entities like you and me, Frank.
Frank looked up, perplexed.
I'm not a mere mortal.
Far from it, Frank. You are a rank and file. What's more,
He looked intently at Frank as he said this.
you are the only one who has ever transcended from mere mortal to rank and file. Suffice to say, there is a lot of interest in you.
I'm the only one.
The corner of Frank's mouth broke into a proud grin.
That makes me kind of special then, doesn't it?
Whether this turn of events is fortunate for you or unfortunate is yet to be determined. I strongly suspect the latter.
Frank's shoulders slumped at hearing this.
I warn you that this situation has developed not necessarily to your advantage.
He looked at Frank with steely eyes.
That's why I was sent to you. I have come to get you before
He grew nervous and his voice trailed off to a whisper.
others do.
Who said you?
I don't know.
And what do you mean you don't know? Why would you come if you didn't know?
I felt compelled.
How did this happen?
Frank asked.
I didn't work for this. I didn't seek it out or want it.
It's impossible to tell. Maybe you were just in the right place at the right time. Or maybe wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe you are a pawn in a plot orchestrated by higher powers. Or it's possible that you were never even human from the start.
Frank pondered these possibilities. None of them appealed to him.
So I'm a rank and file. What does that even mean? How am I any different from a mere mortal?
Rank and files can appear in many different forms, including humanoid form, and are able to travel between omniverses, dimensions, and realms.
How?
Frank asked.
It's what humans would call chromosomes. Chromosomes are everything beyond the world you were living in. Chromosomes are the universal means of currency, time, travel, and power. When your chromosomes began to multiply, you became a full rank and file, and this made you both an asset and a target. Your chromosomes are still progressively multiplying at a dangerous fast rate. Entities will fear you and hunt you for your chromosomes. And whenever they are used, sold, or stolen, you will need to replenish them quickly, or terrible things will happen.
He paused before looking out over the iceberg they were sitting on.
I know.
The fifth tier are the chimpinas. The chimpinas are powerful. They travel the realms, shadowing the rank and files, pursuing them for the chromosomes and pressing them into their service.
Pink Guy began to sweat as he said this.
There are many, and they can be savage.
He was whispering now and looking about as though simply uttering a name could bring devastation.
Several of them are pursuing me ruthlessly, and have sworn to pursue you as well. There is no escaping them. They will find you. All you can do is delay it for as long as possible, and hope that you can escape without too much loss.
Chimpila?
Frank asked. In a flash, Pink Guy had his fingers to his lips.
Say nothing of them.
But who are they and why would they want my chromosomes?
Frank wondered. Pink Guy continued, dismissing the question as more mindless drivel.
The sixth and seventh tiers are shrouded in mystery. Nobody in the tiers below can say, with any certainty, who or what reigns in these two tiers, or even if there are two tiers. Rumor has it that the sixth tier belongs to the Peace Lords, but few would even dare to state that publicly.
The Peace Lords?
Frank repeated.
I'm guessing the Chimpinas are the bad guys, and the Peace Lords are the good guys.
Then you guess like a moron. Some chimpinas are good, others are evil, and some are yet to make their allegiance known. What you have to understand, Frank, is that there are hostilities in the omniverses, and loyalty is currently a very fluid notion. The Peace Lords are extremely powerful, yet no one knows where their allegiances lie. Certainly not us, and perhaps not even amongst the Peace Lords themselves. Some are the very essence of evil, yet wrap themselves in light. Others are pure goodness, yet veil their loyalties with clouds of darkness and deception.
Who is in the top tier? Who has supreme power?
Frank was agitated as he asked this.
The top tier,
Said Pink Guy. He stopped there, lost for words, and Frank looked at him agog.
Tell me about the top tier. You're here to reveal this to me, right? Who or what is at the top tier of being?
Frank glared at Pink Guy as he asked this. Pink Guy appeared reluctant to speak on, as if revealing any such names or identities or titles or presence could see him instantly thrown amongst the wretched.
at the top tier,
He said with a holy awe.
if the stories are true, is the ultimate god.
Pink Guy held Frank's tricep tightly and pulled him near to conclude his revelation.
We think the ultimate god is Chin Chin.
He whispered firmly in Frank's ear. Frank sat in wonder as he heard these words.
The ultimate god.
He mouthed.
Tintin.
Or so we think.
Whispered Pink Guy, leaning in again. They both sat there in reluctance.
The ultimate god is the creator, the owner, the lord of all. He is the great one.
Pink Guy paused again.
But the Peace Lords are becoming very powerful, and they are uniting and amassing many chimpinas to serve under them. They have an untold number of chromosomes in their arsenal, and they are rebelling against any force that opposes them. No one knows anymore where the real power might lie. No one knows who is in control.
He lowered his voice back down to a whisper again.
The tiers are shifting.
He said, excited and horrified.
The natural order is changing. More and more entities are resisting their innate position and are storming other tiers. They do this by stealing chromosomes. It's the ultimate moral depravity. And it can, in effect, not only elevate them to higher tiers, but potentially alter the constitution of others, destining them to lower tiers.
But the Peace Lords,
Said Frank.
well, they condemn those who do these things.
As I said, Frank, the tiers are shifting. Dimensions and realms are warping. This has never happened before. The omniverses no longer have the order that we once knew. Some are even becoming too powerful for the Peace Lords. Frank,
He said, looking about. He reserved his greatest gravity for this summation.
some are contesting the ultimate god.
The air in which they were sitting suddenly felt colder and damper. There was not a breath of wind, but Frank felt a coolness run across his brow.
One more thing, Frank.
He looked at Pink Guy.
Chin Chin himself is coming for you. Your transition provoked him.
Do you mean he is coming for me to get me, or he's coming for me to help me?
Frank, you are completely expendable, and Lord Chin Chin will spare nothing to get your chromosomes to secure his own position. Believe me, the wretched will have nothing on you. Once Chin Chin is done with you, you will wish you were swimming in that abyss.
Frank swallowed hard.
That's why I'm here. I'm here to protect you from Chin Chin. To take you to the furthest realms and deepest recesses of the omniverses to keep you from being found.
Frank sat in silence, processing all of this. The iceberg they were sitting on remained static, and the sea around them continued to display its silent agony. What Frank said next took Pink Guy completely by surprise.
I don't want to be a rank and file.
What?
I want to go back down being a mere mortal. I want to return to what I once was. I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to be hunted by Lord Chin Chin. I want to go back.
Pink Guy snapped at him.
It's too late for that, my friend. There's no turning now. You are what you are, and you must live the life that now you have.
Why? Why does it have to be too late? You said yourself you can't be sure what the upper tiers hold. The Peace Lords are still powerful. They might very well be forces for good. And what of the ultimate god, whoever he is? Why wouldn't he have the power and the inclination to restore me? Between them all, there must be a way. Surely they can make me mortal again. They can stop my chromosomes from multiplying and return me to the life I had.
Pink Guy wanted to ignore this as another sentiment of monumental idiocy, but he could see how determined Frank was.
That might be true,
He said,
but what is possible is not the same as what is probable. And the whim of a rank and file is no match for the will of a lord.
I want to meet one of the great powers.
Frank said, as though stating a universal right.
I want to meet a Peace Lord.
He paused again, processing, and then he came out with it.
I want to meet the ultimate god. I want to plead my case.
Pink Eye shook his head.
You're such a damn fool. You understand nothing. Leave that idea right now, I tell you. Leave it, and have nothing more to go with it.
Frank stood and wiped his hands on his shirt as though to signal cessation in the matter.
We can't stay here forever,
he said. Pink Eye rose with him.
Let's see what else this place has.
They walked off without another word, side by side, yet the conversation trailed behind them like a chest being dragged by a chain. They passed along slippery, narrow gullies with jagged, icy daggers protruding at head height, and a small stalagmite formations underfoot. The landscape would change in appearance, but not nature. They walked along broad, open, glacier-like fields, climbed walls of glass, and stepped down into bulky gorges. Yet there was never a sound, nor a smell, nor a sense of fear or excitement. It was as though they were in their own bubble, separated from all other life and matter, all other sentiment and spirit. Whilst there was no point in staying put, there was, clearly no point in continuing either. Eventually, Pink Guy spoke.
I have coordinates for you, Frank.
They stopped walking and faced each other.
These coordinates will take you to a safe place. It's right off the grid. No one will find you there.
That's not necessarily good news,
Frank returned.
It's good news for now,
he said, looking at the limbs reaching up from the expanse around them.
Just recite them as I give them to you, and create the same circle of blood, and you will be taken there.
And what about you?
My work here is done.
You're not coming too?
I don't have enough chromosomes to travel further, and this place allows me for no more replenishment.
He looked stoic.
This is the end of the road for me. They will come. They will find me.
You came to warn me on a suicide mission?
Suicide, no. But there is no more life ahead for me. My future ceases to exist here.
Though he barely knew Pink Guy, and he had never really cared for anybody before in his life, hearing this was like a stab in the chest.
I will come back for you,
Frank said with a newfound ethic.
It will be too late. They will find me here before you return, and they will condemn me without a moment's hesitation.
Use my chromosomes,
Frank insisted.
If you use mine, then we can both go through.
Pink Guy shook his head.
That wouldn't leave you with enough chromosomes to travel on if you needed to. And that would be a very dangerous state to be in.
But the place I'm going to is safe, right? I can stay there until my chromosomes replenished and then move on.
Pink Guy considered this with caution. It made sense, but it was not part of the plan.
I have no idea where I'm going,
Frank continued.
What to do there or when and where to move again. I need you to come with me. Surely we're safer together.
Pink Guy squatted before his new friend, deep in thought.
Let's go then,
he said, looking up. He stood shoulder to shoulder with Frank.
You will need to cut your hand and create a circle of blood around us as before. I will recite the coordinates.
What if you get the coordinates wrong?
Frank asked casually, almost as a joke. Pink Guy responded with a look that shook Frank to his very core.
Then heaven help us,
he said, breaking out into another sweat. This passing question of Frank's led to a flurry of others, which suddenly took him to dark places. Who was this Pink Guy really? How did Frank know he could trust him? What if he were one of the lackeys of an evil peace lord? What if here were a peace lord? What if he were Chin Chin himself? Frank, caught up in the moment, came right out with this last question and barked it to Pink Guy's face.
If I were Chin Chin, I would have stolen your chromosomes and finished you off in a flash. You would be bathing with our friends right there in the sea of infernal suffering.
Frank, still breathing heavily, looked Pink Guy in the eye.
Good answer,
he said through clenched teeth.
Good answer.
Frank walked over to a shard of ice and ran his hand along it. The life force flowed freely from the wound. He returned to Pink Guy, who had already begun reciting the coordinates. Frank made the crimson circle around them both before standing back to back with his comrade. Over and over, Pink Guy called the numbers and letters, louder and louder, with increasing zeal. Frank prepared for destruction. As Pink Guy continued to call, Frank continued to brace. On and on he called with a voice that rose up over the sea. It soon reached fever pitch, bursting with prolepsis. Then suddenly he slumped.
What happened?
Asked Frank.
I don't know, it's not working, nothing is happening.
Are you sure you got the coordinates right?
Are you sure you used the right blood?
Pink Guy shot back, offended. Frank began to move from his spot, and as he did, he felt the squelch of soft ground beneath him.
It's soft,
he cried.
So it is.
Pink Guy returned. Indeed, the land outside the circle remained as hard as a diamond, but the ground inside continued to soften and liquefy. The more they trod within the circle, the more pulpy the ground became, until before long they were ankle deep in water. To hasten the process, they began to jump up and down, being very careful to stay within the confines of the red band. Neither of them were aware of the rate at which they were sinking into the hole, so suddenly being waist-deep in water took them both by surprise. The greater shock came moments later when Frank found himself on his own, in near total darkness, overtaken by torrents of water. He was drowning. At first, his sole awareness was of his impending death, yet this fear was easily surpassed by the torment of the wretched as he brushed by them. Souls of children long deceased, yet still perishing, grabbed at his fingers and toes, begging for help, pleading for mercy, wailing and cursing, tossing about in their own torment, and laying hold of him. They stared at him through empty eye sockets, and wailed through stitched mouths. They would float by him, writhing and holding their bellies in agony as they inflated and then burst open. From the wound, new infants would ooze out before their bellies swelled and ruptured, and so the nightmare would go on. Other babies, gliding with awkward flinches through the murkiness, would suddenly stop and then turn completely inside out. Muscle and bone would remain frailly bound together, but strings of intestines and sinew would be flung off into the swell. As such, the current surrounding him was a thick amniotic soup. The infants were instinctively grabbing and gnawing on each other as they drifted about, yet a sad semblance of compassion developed in which they would pull out their own teeth to spare the others, but their teeth would rapidly and constantly grow back. Frank felt their agony. He felt their pain in all its forms and degrees. His screams became bawls.
But I'm sorry I can't save you.
The grasping and calling, the sorrow and the sobbing continued unabated, until Frank took one final gasp, filled his lungs with the fluid, and floated off to his quiet end.
What, is that too rude?